So I know we had several students who were absent for various reasons when we discussed the topic outline process and how we're going to now turn our focus into organizing for the research paper. So I wanted to go ahead and create this video to be able to walk everyone through this. So the first big piece that I want everyone to understand is that your research paper is focused not on the research, but actually on your novel. And you'll see that as we begin going through today, that our focus is really to analyze the novel, and we're just using the research that we have found to support that analysis. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the novel that as we've read so far, and we're going to brainstorm a point to be able to argue, and the key word there is to argue. Because if we don't have something to argue, if it's not debatable, then this just becomes a report. And reports were wonderful and lovely when we were in like the 4th and 5th grade, but they don't work for us any longer. So we want to start by examining the research topic and ask questions about the author's choices regarding that topic, and that's really key. So we know that that Bronte is speaking about the issue of gender within the novel. Now we have to decide what choices did she make regarding that topic. So this is the process that I'd like you to walk through, and as I'm going through this, I'm using the novel Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen as my example. So if I'm looking at the topic of courtship, I might look back at all the research that I've read, I'll go back to my annotated bibliography, and I'm going to ask myself, how does courtship customs play a role in the development of relationships? So that's the question that I kind of come to after I've read everything. And then I'm going to think about my answer as it would be answered from the research. So a possible answer after having looked at everything would be that those that act outside of conventional courting customs have doomed relationships. Now that's debatable, right? I mean, it has this word doomed right there in it. And that is my judgment. I'm placing my own judgment in there. Then I'm going to connect my ideas, and when I connect ideas, I am connecting them back to the novel, and that's key. I've got to connect these ideas now to the novel itself, and so I'm going to think back and go, you know what, when I looked at these two characters, Lydia and Wickham, when they elope, it really seems as if their marriage is ill-fated. You know, nobody believes that this is actually going to be a good relationship. And so the statement that I might be able to come from, and this is the idea that I'm trying to prove, is that those who follow the conventions of courting customs have stronger relationships than those that do not. Now again, that's debatable. But I'm saying here, I'm making the statement that based on my research and based on my examination of the novel, I believe that statement to be true, and that becomes my controlling idea, and that's key right there. So your controlling idea is the spoke in the wheel. It's the center of the spider web. It's the ooeyest, gooeyest center of the cinnamon roll. It's everything. It's what everything else is connected to, is this controlling idea. Now, the preliminary thesis certainly comes from the controlling idea. In its simplest form, we take the topic proposal and we connect it to the novel, and there we have our preliminary thesis. So let's walk through this idea, this process again, and see how we take the next step to turning that controlling idea into a preliminary thesis. So this time, if I'm looking at the topic of marriage and social status, which I know many people are, even in Jane Eyre, my topic question might be, why were women so eager to marry to be able to increase their social status? Why did that seem to be kind of the norm? And again, I'm going to brainstorm some possible answers. Without opportunities to secure financial security, women often saw marriage as their only means of rising in social status. Now again, I've come to that conclusion because of all the research and reading that I've done so far. Then I'm going to connect ideas, and I'm connecting ideas again back to my novel. And so I'm going to look and say, you know what, Mrs. Bennet places extreme importance on her daughters marrying wealthy men because of their family's financial situation. Mrs. Bennet knows that if her daughters don't marry well, then there's the possibility they may not be able to provide for themselves. So now I'm going to connect that into a controlling idea. And so I'm going to say, you know what, I think that this shows that the author is arguing that women should not be forced into marriages merely for an increased social status. And I turn that now into my preliminary thesis. An examination of Mrs. Bennet's perceptions of her daughters reveals the misguided notion of marriage as a means to increase social status in Jane Austen's novel Pride and Prejudice. Few key things in this statement. We have this very first part where we're looking at Mrs. Bennet's perception of her daughters. That's my connection to my novel. Then I have marriage as a means to increase social status. That's my connection back to my topic proposal, to the research. I, of course, have the author, the title, and the type of literature, Jane Austen's novel Pride and Prejudice. But I also have this key word in here, which is misguided. That's a judgment. Remember our judgment back here in the controlling idea, that those who follow the conventions of courting customs have stronger relationships, and I said that's a judgment that I'm making. Well, the same thing is seen here in this preliminary thesis statement when I say that it's misguided. So you have to have that key word or phrase that lets me know this is your judgment, this is your debatable idea. So that's your preliminary thesis. Now the bare bones, of course, again, has to have a connection back to the research topic, has to have a connection to the novel. I need to see the author, title, type of literature. I also need you to know that this preliminary thesis is going to change. It is going to change. It is extremely rare for a student to have the exact same thesis statement on her top line that she has on her final draft of the research paper. So don't go falling in love with your thesis statement, because it's going to break your heart. Okay, so now that we have our preliminary thesis statement, now we're going to begin to organize our ideas into a topic outline. And really and truly, that's what the topic outline is. This is just an organizational tool. So the purpose is to organize your ideas. I would begin by reviewing your research. I would then review your connections to the novel, and then we're going to begin to logically arrange them. So the basic format, and this is what your formatting needs to look like. You need to have your author, title, type of literature. Notice that you've got your heading. Your title doesn't have to be anything fancy. Topic outline is fine. Thesis statement, those words actually have to appear on your statement, and they need to be in italics. And then you've got a colon, and then you're going to give me your preliminary thesis statement. Now this is the way that your outline is going to run. So you have Roman numerals, capital letters, and then Arabic numbers down here. This Roman numeral is really just an umbrella idea. It's not going to be a sentence in your paper. It won't end up really as part of that final drafting process. This is just for organizational purposes. Now your A will eventually become a topic sentence. So you can consider each time you see a letter, that's a body paragraph. And under each letter, you have a 1 and a 2. Your 1 will always be the novel example. Your 2 is always the research support. The novel always has to come first. There are no exceptions to that. If the novel doesn't come first, there is a strong desire to then make the research the focus of the paragraph. So that's why the novel always comes first. So here is an example topic outline. Okay, a few things I want you to notice. 1, we have very short phrases or single words. This is a topic outline. That's exactly what it should look like. 2, I want you to notice how it is consistent, it is parallel in its organization. So I start with Jane, and I talk about Jane's role in the family, Elizabeth's role in the family, Mary's role in the family. Jane and Bingley, that's her husband, Elizabeth and Darcy. Now Mary, because she's unmarried, at the end, then I put married women. I also want you to notice that the 1s and 2s are the exact same for Jane and Bingley as they are for Elizabeth and Darcy, and that's fine. Okay, that's absolutely fine. So notice the consistency, notice the parallelism, notice how logical it is in terms of discussing first the role and then kind of their outcome, the idea of what their resolution is. Okay. Now, when you're doing your topic outlines, please pay special attention to number and letter formatting. You will lose points if it is not too perfect format. And again, here is the perfect format right there. Make sure that you are listing just general topics of information. Again, think single words, think short phrases. There should be no punctuation because there should be no sentences. Each level must have at least 2 sublevels. So if you have a 1, you have to have a 2. If you have an A, you have to have a B. You also need to have the same level of generality and parallelism in syntax. And again, you saw that back here, how everything is very similar and parallel with one another. Now, I have for you your sample topic outlines, again, so you can kind of see the good version and the bad version. If you haven't picked up a hard copy of those, they are available in my classroom, but I'm going to post them to Schoology as well. If you have questions, please let me know, and happy writing.